The following cases showcase some of the most tragic narratives of young individuals who, despite their young ages, committed heinous crimes against others. Dylan Schumacher found himself unable to quiet a 2-year-old child under his care, leading him to commit a tragic and unthinkable act. In an attempt to stop the child from crying, he struck the baby's face with enough force that proved fatal. During the court proceedings, Schumacher tried to evoke sympathy by playing the sympathy card. However, a prior phone call came to light, where he mentioned that all he had to do was cry in court, and being a white boy, he could gain the judge's sympathy. Contrary to his expectations, Schumacher did not receive the judge's sympathy, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison for this crime. Matthew Bourget. The level of extreme violence witnessed is incomparable to the unimaginable brutality exhibited by Matthew Bourget. At the age of 15, Bourget, far from an average school kid, beheaded his classmate. 3 years later, when he stood trial as an adult, he faced the full extent of punishment. In court, the victim's mother shed tears for her child, and as a result, Bourget was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Aiden von Grabo defendants often come up with bizarre excuses for their crimes, and Aiden von Grabo was no exception, blaming his acne medication. His defense argued that he turned into a ruthless murderer of Michaela Grote solely due to the medication, although criminal tendencies are certainly not listed as side effects. Aiden brutally stabbed Michaela on her stairwell and conspired to murder her sister, all stemming from his twisted mind. In court, the emotional pleas from Michaela's friends and family touched everyone, leading to Aiden receiving the punishment he deserved: 40 years of prison time with a possibility of parole after 4 decades. Gavin Ramsey attempted a similar defense. At the age of 17, Ramsey committed an unspeakable act by taking the life of an elderly person. He unlawfully entered the home of 98-year-old Margaret Douglas, where he filmed her sleeping, proceeded to murder her, and violated her corpse. In court, Ramsey's family attributed his actions to medication and childhood abuse, and he attempted to convey a sentiment of sympathy with statements like, "I'm so sorry for what I did." Despite these efforts, Margaret's family did not share the same sympathy. The judge, too, lacked sympathy, resulting in Ramsey receiving a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole, even considering his age. Monica Hiccup. Monica Hiccup Girl first gained notoriety for her uncontrollable hiccuping on television, but behind the mockery lies a darker story. In a past incident, Monica and her friends lured a man to an abandoned house under the guise of selling him weed. However, the encounter took a tragic turn, as they ended up robbing and murdering him. Despite the courtroom being an unsuitable place for hiccuping, the stress of a guilty verdict from the jury strangely acted as a miraculous cure. Consequently, she received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In the courtroom, the jury declared her guilty of first-degree murder, leading to the judge proclaiming, "Having found you guilty of murder in the first degree, I will adjudicate you guilty and sentence you to life in prison without parole." Jonathan Perales. Jonathan Perales faced charges of capital murder for taking the life of a university physician assistant during a house break-in for robbery. The heroic Michael Robinson, the assistant, defended his family during the confrontation. Perales stood before Robinson's family in court and was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Aiden Fuji. At just 14 years old, Aiden Fuji committed the horrific and vicious act of stabbing Tristan Bailey 114 times. Adding to the distress, Fuji vehemently denied his involvement for an extended period before eventually pleading guilty. The motive behind such a heinous act remains a mystery, even prompting the judge to label it the most challenging case in St. John during his 16 years of service. Following his guilty plea, Fuji received a life sentence in prison, with the chance of parole after 25 years, contingent upon his behavior as an adult not taking a more severe turn. Sierra Hulseth and Aaron Guerrero faced severe consequences for their heinous actions, directed towards Sierra's own father. The judge presiding over the case had a significant task in handling the disturbing details involving the 16-year-old Sierra and 18-year-old Aaron. In a brutal attack, Guerrero stabbed Sierra's father, Daniel, 70 times, a gruesome act amplified by their attempt to dismember the body with a chainsaw and set it on fire. The unimaginably wicked nature of these crimes makes it challenging to believe they were real. Adding to the disturbing scene was Sierra's complete lack of emotion in court, presenting an eerie and soulless expression akin to a true lunatic. The judge delivered a lengthy sentencing, outlining the consequences for each count. Sierra received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 20 years, reflecting the gravity of their actions as detailed in their extensive crime sheets. Marty Fuller, at the age of 16, exhibited an incredibly extreme reaction when his ex-girlfriend, Kaylee Duga, became the target of his violence, ultimately leading to her murder. He went further by attempting to take the life of Kaylee's mother, Stephanie. Despite attempts to portray Fuller as the once perfect student and kid, these efforts proved manipulative in trying to elicit emotions from the jury. Fortunately, the strategy did not succeed, and Fuller was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sean Bell Jackson. Certain perpetrators faced swift justice in court, such as Sean Bell Jackson. After taking the life of Nathan Parker in a senseless act of petty robbery, Jackson brazenly attempted to resist his life sentence without parole during sentencing. In a callous display of remorselessness, he continually turned around to face the weeping victim's family, seemingly unwilling to acknowledge his responsibility for squandering his life. Eventually, Jackson was pepper-sprayed and physically restrained to be removed from the court. TJ Lane. In the trial for the unspeakable school shooting at Ohio's Chardon High, 17-year-old TJ Lane showed a jaw-dropping lack of remorse, faced charges for the cold-blooded murder of 6 students, astonishingly taunted his victim's family, showing up to court wearing a shirt with the word killer on it. TJ's remorselessness extended further as he brazenly taunted the families of the victims, callously uttering the word fantastic. Philip Chisholm. At the age of 14, Philip Chisholm committed a horrific act against his high school math teacher, Colleen Ritzer, raping and murdering her before disposing of her body behind the school. The incomprehensibility of how such a young man could conceive of such actions towards his teacher baffles everyone. The law, however, did not take his age into consideration when sentencing him to life in prison for these crimes. Initially committed to the Department of Youth Services until the age of 21, it is evident that Philip's education will be limited to a basic grade 9 for the rest of his life. Given the severity of your offenses, it is hereby ordered that you be committed to the Department of Youth Services until the age of 21. Furthermore, you are to be committed to the Massachusetts Correctional Institution at Cedar Junction for a period not less than 40 years, and not more than 40 years in one day. Michael Swanson families like that of Michael Swanson faced the grim reality when he, at just 17 years old, entered a gas station under the pretense of buying cigarettes, but instead murdered the clerk. What made this heinous act even more appalling was that he repeated it at another gas station just an hour later, solidifying it as a cold-blooded murder spree rather than a spontaneous event. During the court proceedings, the victim's daughter questioned Swanson's sincerity, asking, "Are you even sorry for what you did?" She emotionally expressed that her completely innocent and defenseless mother was taken away with a smirking smile on Swanson's face. In response, the court handed down 2 life sentences, wiping that smile away. Kyle Hooper and Amber Wright. What's even more disturbing than a single deranged killer is a group of them, and Kyle Hooper and Amber Wright found themselves entangled in this grotesque company. As siblings aged 16 and 17, they now share the somber bond of spending their entire lives in prison for the monstrous torture and murder of Seth Jackson, whose life they callously extinguished. In court, the brother and sister appeared entirely emotionless when facing the victim's family members. Despite the attorney's attempt to lighten their sentence by citing their age, the judge firmly rejected it, deeming the case as the most cold, calculated, premeditated murder he had ever witnessed. At least these siblings acknowledged their actions and were unsurprised at the severity of their punishment. Conrad Schaefer. At the age of 18, Conrad Schaefer unleashed a reign of terror upon the entire town of Osceola County for weeks, resulting in the murder of 2 individuals. This psychotic crime spree seemingly originated when he was just 15, engaging in acts such as shooting up houses with friends. In court, Schaefer appeared no older than kids typically immersed in video games, but he now faced the grim reality of spending a life sentence behind bars. Dexter Johnson. In the case of a brutal murder, the law did not extend leniency to 18-year-old Dexter Johnson. Johnson was implicated in the sexual assault and murder of Maria Apparence, participating with friends in the hijacking of their car, subjecting them to true terror on the road. The justice system showed no mercy, sentencing Johnson to death for his involvement in 3 or more crimes. These charges caused a significant commotion in court, particularly when his mother broke down, recognizing that she was about to lose her son. However, he had already been lost when he entered that car. Franecha Torres. In a 30-hour crime spree, 18-year-old Franecha Torres became entangled in the robbery and murder of William Tun Shea. Although Torres initiated the villainous plan by luring Shea to his death, she appeared shocked in court when facing the charges. With 3 warrants for armed robbery and 1 for felony murder, Torres's expression conveyed surprise. Danta Wright, equally infuriating, was the demeanor of teenage perpetrator Danta Wright, who sat in court smiling and smirking at his murder victim, Jordan Clee's family. Clee, a promising young man, tragically lost his life to monsters like Wright, who, in the judge's opinion, didn't even deserve his plea deal. The judge expressed frustration, questioning why Wright would treat the situation with such nonchalance. Considering rejecting the plea deal, the judge contemplated a trial that could lead to a life sentence for felony murder. Eventually, Wright received a 30-year sentence, likely providing some satisfaction to Clee's mother, who witnessed Wright's disrespectful actions in court. It appears that accountability is a concept lost on many murderers, much like Wright. Jacob Morgan. In court, 17-year-old Jacob Morgan displayed tears and shock, seemingly struck by a sudden feeling of guilt after setting fire to his house, which resulted in the tragic death of his 14-month-old brother. However, a closer examination of the case reveals that Morgan is on the autism spectrum, fixated on fire, and forgot that his little brother was still in the house. In court, Morgan cried for his baby brother and displayed genuine remorse, raising the question, is a 15-year sentence justice? Luis Ray caused a commotion in court, banging on the doors and screaming, driven by the realization that he would be incarcerated for the next 30 years. This severe sentence resulted from his involvement, at the age of 14, in the robbery, rape, and beating of a 91-year-old woman. Prosecutors and the judge showed no mercy, compelling Ray to mark his sweet 16th birthday with a candle in a prison cell. The motivations behind someone committing such crimes remain unfathomable. Which of these criminals did you find to be the most malignant? Let us know in the comments below, and follow our channel for more content.